welcome to my podcast called The Traumatized Man, where we will be discussing the journey of manhood, specifically when you don't have examples of what manhood is. I myself am a traumatized man, a fatherless man. I grew up without proper representation of what a man is and what that looks like in my life, how it impacts my life in the future. And I'm just fascinated with the things that I had to learn on my own that could have potentially been avoided uh, based on having a dad, based on listening to a man that loved me and knew what I needed as a young man. And really, that's the thing here, is that because I grew up without that example, without that proper love and discipline in my life, I began to have to figure this thing out myself. And that in itself is a traumatization, right? But also the other things, the impacts of poverty, the impacts of abuse, the impacts of dysfunction, a home where maybe you did not choose this life, it chose you, and you had to figure out how to navigate through that. And what is that impact? What does that do to you as an adult? What for me specifically, yeah, there's things that I had to deal with well into my adulthood, that as I walked through life and walked through this journey, my career, and just my personal life, I realized that a lot of men don't have to deal with. They don't have to deal with it because they didn't lack in that way. So it made me very passionate about fatherhood. It made me very passionate about being an example. It really kind of kicked into gear when I had my oldest son. He is 28 now. I had him when I was 19. But even at that time, really quickly, I realized I needed to grow up and be a good representative for him. And I tried ever since then. I tried my best. And today we have a great relationship. We've had our ups and downs, but overall, just a great father-son relationship. He respects me a lot. I respect him a lot. Along with my middle son, who is now 23. And then I have a daughter as well. She's 19. This journey that I went on to learn how to be a father to my son specifically, I'm really starting to see and notice this generation of young people that we have coming up in this country specifically that really lack the basics of understanding what is a man. I see it well through my generation. I'm Generation X. I'm 48 years old. I think my generation had the benefit of experiencing the baby boomer generation and those before, and also this new post-internet generation. There's these digital natives that are coming up even now. I think if we assess what's going on, my generation failed just as much as the previous one in terms of manhood. Thus, the big battle against masculinity and toxic masculinity and all of that. That's something that I've struggled with all my life. Is what is toxic masculinity? Is all masculinity toxic? Because if that's the case, I'm definitely more masculine than not. That's part of not having the example of what a healthy masculine man looks like. A man that does what he has to do for the people that he loves, whether that means death. Learned so much through my personal life, different things that I've done throughout my life, working in different churches as a men's group leader, youth leader. Where I thrive the best is where I had a chance to mentor young men that are going through what I'm going through or what I've been through, and even older men for that matter. So that said, this is my push now. I'm at a different stage in life. I'm starting to have grandkids, believe it or not. My kids are growing up, living their lives, and my wife and I are figuring our thing out, and we're very excited about this next stage in life. But I start to think about, what am I doing to contribute to this? Because I truly believe that our generation, Generation X, has a responsibility to step up here and teach these young bucks how to be a man. Whether we had to learn it ourselves or whether we had a father that taught us. our responsibility is to teach how to be a man. And if there's less fathers and there's more young kids coming up, it only takes a couple generations before this thing really starts to head downhill. And I personally grew up where masculinity was not men should be looking like, unintimidating, right? Unmasculine, because at least the impression was, if you're masculine, you're toxic. If you get loud, you're toxic. And or if you sound defensive and you use your masculine ways to be overbearing, you're toxic. And I'm not for toxic masculinity. I think anything can be toxic and done in extreme. Definitely can't look away from that. This thing is implanted in most of us men. We're naturally bent towards it. That's one of the reasons why I believe young men in the schools today struggle with ADHD, whatever. They can't sit still. They want to medicate them. This is where the society took this generation of young men. And it is more evident than ever before. And I guess what I want to do is share my story and talk about, the things I struggled with as a young man, my areas of weakness. I'm going to have to be very vulnerable during these conversations, and I'm prepared to. I've thought a lot about it. That's where I'm at. That's the stage I'm at in life. Am I here to be the best I can be and help as many people as I can to grow and be successful and go to the next step in life? I think so. I've always had that passion, especially young men. I've been passionate about it. I'm a very passionate father, and as a father, I've had my own tactics, my own approaches, and I've been looked down upon, if I'm honest, with some of my approaches. My sons are some of the hardest workers out there. They're dedicated to their jobs, and that's step number one to being a man, by the way. Step number one. So there's no manual to teach us how to be this perfect male in this earth, because there is no perfect male. There was one. In terms of us humans, us regular folk, us uneducated, we had to learn this stuff on our own. We had to figure this stuff on our own. And I think that there's, today there's a lot of young men that could use the help, use a piece of advice. How do I navigate through this? What is a man? Just someone who's rich and has possessions and has women and whatever. Yeah, maybe. Some of it. I'm not opposed to that stuff. But is it just that? No. We are blinded to the fact of what's truly important in life. And I think that's the first thing a father should teach a young man, is what is truly important. What should you prioritize in life? Because I can tell you right now, it sure as hell is not money. And it's not women from the sexual perspective only. It's much deeper than that, right? And if you truly want to see success in your life, where you rise up and you have confidence in yourself and you walk with your chest out, but not prideful, not egotistical, not bullying in any way, not demeaning to other people. That real men don't do that shit. We live in a world where these generation of young men are walking around wearing shirts that say alpha. Let me tell you something, bro. If you're wearing a shirt that says alpha, you're probably not an alpha. The alpha doesn't need to wear a shirt that says alpha. Someone misled you. Someone told you this is what an alpha looks like. They're misleading you. That's not an alpha. That's what I want to talk about. That's what I want this podcast to be about. And all these things, these lessons, I had to learn these things on my own in my life. And I very much suffered from lack of education, I guess I'll call it, in terms of parenting, in terms of fatherhood, in terms of manhood. What is a man? Is a man that just can beat everybody up? I think we're simple beings, but we're much deeper than what they give us credit for. Men definitely make the world go around. To demean that, say that masculinity is this toxic thing that boys shouldn't have, I don't agree with that. This is why we're at where we're at. There's a different breed of men. I hear it all the time. You talk about my grandpa stormed the beaches of Normandy. My grandpa was a Mexican American that came out of the Rio Grande Valley, and I think he got drafted. I don't know the full story, but I'm very proud of who he is. He's my mother's stepfather, but he's the only grandpa I ever knew. He stormed the beaches of Normandy, the front lines, and that's where he was at, and he lived through that mess. from what I understand, he struggled with coming back to normal civilization, being too aggressive because of what he experienced and his previous life of poverty, of probably a broken home, a dysfunctional home. He experienced, some heavy stuff, I think. He started off bad. I don't know if his father was in his life. What I do know when it comes to Mexican men and the culture that we come from, you have a couple families. The fathers, they did what they did, disappear for 3-4 days, drinking, whatever, come back, go to work. So it's there's a lot of question about examples of manhood and what that looks like, and I personally, I'm learning to navigate through all that, and in my life I had this opportunity to live as a migrant Mexican, a blessing to live as a migrant Mexican, work in the fields. I didn't work that much, if I'm honest. I was a little kid, and I did some, but not like my stepfather and my mother. My mother was sick. She had chronic asthma. It's actually what took her life when I was 12 years old. But I had the opportunity to live as a migrant Mexican, and it taught me what work is. It taught me what hard work is. But it also taught me what the bottom of what a second-class citizen is as well. Outside of being homeless and eating at soup kitchen, and I've ate at soup kitchens. It showed me that hard work is extremely important. There's so many hardworking people out there, not lazy people. It taught me that not all hard work is the right work. So it's not just hard work. I didn't like hearing that growing up because I watched my parents break their backs, have nothing to show for that. We lived in migrant camps with no plumbing. We lived in migrant camps in the late 80s, early 90s with an outhouse. We took a shit in a hole as little kids, afraid we're going to fall in there. And we should be. There was a shack that had steel grating, no floor, it had steel grating. Just had to wear flip-flops, like prison. And there's a pipe sticking out of the wall, and that's where you took showers. That's normal. It's nothing. I watched my family bust their ass, work hard, and have nothing to show for it. No way out. Be trapped. I told myself I don't want to do that. I want to figure out how to not do that. Seeing the examples of these things in my life, feeling the impacts of alcoholism, the impacts of drugs, the impacts of sickness. Like I said, my mom was a chronic asthmatic, really bad. She would definitely get an asthma attack, anytime. And things as little as dust would bother her. But anyway, she passed away from that. And we just lived a life watching her having asthma attacks. But she had some machine that she would breathe, medicine out of, and we just got used to it. It was natural. But anyways, we're gonna get into all of those topics, all of those situations. I want to talk about how did I navigate through poverty, the impacts of poverty, the impacts of being a minority in this country, right? I'm not a race guy. I don't like playing the race card. I don't play that game. I think playing the race card is shallow. But, and minorities know this more than anybody, there's definitely a difference, no doubt. And it's natural in terms of races becoming separate and divided. Go to prison, you're going to find out real quick. You stick with your race. But the injustice of suppressing or demeaning another one, that's another conversation. That's a crime against humanity, for sure. But anyways, let's talk about that. Let's talk about growing up in a place where Hispanics represented less than 3% of the population, to now living in a place where Hispanics represent up to 30% of the population. Also, being a 4th-degree felon. How did I navigate through my career? I was able to accomplish some things and do some things. Nothing special, but learn some things and move up the ladder in different organizations. How did I do that? Being a 4th-degree felon that only has a GED education. How did we get there? Because I know for a fact there's so many young fatherless men right now that want to be out of the situation that they're in, but have no idea. They don't even realize that it takes first you looking in the mirror. Kick this thing off, because I think it could be so helpful to young men that at the end of the day, they're going to listen to Jordan Peterson and be like, what? It's like reading his book, Maps of Meaning, or be a philosopher, right? And because of that barrier, it's very hard for young men to let people in and humble themselves and actually submit their minds to a point where they can receive something. The only thing that submits their minds is power, strength, respect. And that comes out in different ways. But my point is that a group of young men out there that are looking for opportunities to man up, looking for opportunities to know what it means to man up. Sector of young men that is a large sector that lack education, that lack family, overall ideology, whether that be religious ideology or whether that be just something to believe in. And they're learning to navigate through this life, and sometimes avenues to get better, rehab, whatnot, they're not the easiest avenue to take. They're not the easiest avenue to let in. This is why I'm starting this podcast. I want this podcast to help young fatherless men that don't know where to start, get them on the right track to being real men, responsible men, accountable men that understand you need self-discipline before you apply discipline to anybody else. You learn to respect in a submissive way to another man out of true respect, way because you're fearful, but a respect that reverences someone like a mentor, because it teaches you respect and it teaches you to give out respect, and people will respect you. But it's hard to submit yourself to a mentor when you've never had a father, you never had an example to come in and say, I love you. And this is why I'm going to do this now. Kick you in the ass, get out there and pick up the dog shit. Like you said, no excuses. It's hard when you've never heard that in your life. But then come back and say, hey, buddy, listen, I do this because I love you, because I'm trying to teach you to work hard. I'm trying to give you work ethic. So that's what this podcast is going to be about. And I'm excited for it. I think it's going to help a lot of young men that, hey, in a normal case, they wouldn't go sit down with a psychiatrist or sit down and listen to anybody, a pastor or anybody. But to someone that's been broken, someone that comes from where they come from, someone that comes in from a fatherless situation, poverty and abuse, and dealing with anger and dealing with pride and dealing with ego, and how do you do it? How do you do that and keep yourself so you don't do nothing stupid? You don't make mistakes. How do you gain work ethic? That's what this is going to be about. Alrighty.